Well, folks, today it's time. Time to do a full look at one of the most storied and gigantic bands of the 90s. A band who took the world by storm in ways that it seems like no other band has ever come close to doing since. They filled stadiums, went on world tours, conquered America, and were perhaps the last band to truly embody sex, drugs, and rock and roll as they built their legendary reputation for volatility and excess, all while blasting out classic song after classic song. Well, anyway, here's Wonderwall.
Today is gonna be the day.
Today is gonna be the day that we talk about the British rock band of the 90s, Oasis. In this country, I don't think we really have much of a grip on how big they were. And they were very, very big in this country. But in the UK, they were gods. Their two dueling stars, lead singer Liam Gallagher and his big brother, lead songwriter Noel, became larger-than-life figures. They were just constantly making headlines with their arrogant self-regard, bad behavior, and hatred of each other. In 1995, a record label issued a single that was just audio of Liam and Noel having a violent argument during an interview.
Nobody fuck, no, that's right. Of course he fucking was. They were a great rock and roll band. No. Fuck off. Nobody had a bit bullshit.
And it charted. That's how big they were. And they deserve to be that big because back to back, in a couple short years, they released two of the greatest albums in rock history. And no, I don't think that's exaggerating. Oasis's first two records really are just that damn good. Once might be a fluke, but for your first two records that kick that much ass, you'd think they go down in history as one of the all-time greats. And then, they blew it. In 1997, Oasis released their bloated disaster of a third album, Be Here Now.
I don't know what happens to that. It's all... and all the songs are really long, and all the lyrics are shit.
It didn't kill their careers. After those first two albums, there's a good chance nothing could kill their careers, and certainly nothing ever has. But what it did kill was their relevance, and arguably the relevance of their entire genre. It wasn't apparent at first, but in hindsight, this was the moment where it all went wrong. They were just never good again. They spent the rest of their careers straining to reach that past greatness, but though they tried, they would never release a Wonderwall, or a Live Forever, or even a Roll With It ever again. Even the title seemed like a warning. Be here now, 'cause we'll be gone tomorrow. What happened? What the hell went wrong? What's the story, Morning Glory? What was that squabbling group of monobrowed idiots thinking? Well, let's find out. This is Train Records. Okay, full disclosure, this episode was one of the requests I got when I was selling those off. It was the only Train Records request I got. But I was already planning this one anyway. See, I come into the Oasis story right around this time. I was a teenager, I was just getting into music, and Wonderwall was already permanently etched into the cultural DNA. Oasis were still one of the hottest, must-listen bands around. I picked up What's the Story Morning Glory from the UCD store and it blew my mind. I found a copy of their first album, Definitely Maybe, a short time afterward, and it blew my mind again. But despite Be Here Now being the current record at the time, I have never listened to it before this year. I was just never encouraged to. The singles all disappeared from rock radio fairly quickly, and slowly over time in this country, all their hits except Wonderwall kind of faded from public memory. This album really is a train wreck, in almost every sense, but especially how it was a band moving way too fast until their momentum just suddenly stopped in a massive rubbernecker attracting catastrophe. They just released Definitely Maybe and What's the Story Morning Glory, and they follow that with this half-assed disappointment? Yeah, you can imagine how the critics responded at the time. Yeah, that's right. They responded with rapturous, overwhelming praise. You see, the press was completely caught off guard by Morning Glory. No one saw it coming. No one recognized it for what it was. So when this album came out, the critics overcorrected, and they just fell over themselves raving about this album. That was not an impression that lasted. In fact, let me read some of the critics at the time versus the critics 10 years later. 4 stars! Just great rock and roll. A rock folly, a coke-fueled monument to 90s excess. A triumph! The album that makes Oasis into a global force. The kind of studio monstrosity that just can't happen without a rare cosmic conversion of money, ego, hostility, and guitar overdubs. A great rock record. Certainly the greatest Oasis album ever made. Overwrought, soupy, completely meaningless. 5 stars! A bundle of delights. You have to go back to the Beatles' Revolver for a set whose every constituent could be spun off into the singles chart. One of the most agonizing listening experiences in pop music. So where did it all go wrong? Well, why don't we look at the first single, and the album opener, Do You Know What I Mean? Yeah, we're starting off big. Helicopters, crowd noise, guitars. And then the song kicks in.
Step off the train all alone at dawn, back into the home where I was born. Sun in the sky never raised the night to me.
Sounds like Oasis. We're in new territory for this show because, unlike previous albums I've covered, this wasn't a change in direction at all. It's still definitely Oasis. Same colossal arrogance, same overbearingly loud guitars. And yet, this is just not working for me. What's going on here? Well, maybe it's the chorus. Here it is in full. This is meaningless. The title is meaningless. It's just a filler phrase that the British use, very commonly used in England, especially commonly used by the Gallaghers. They toss it at the end of every goddamn sentence.
Do you know what I mean?
It's just lazy, empty songwriting from Noel. I assume the other drafts were named after all their other tossed-off catchphrases like "Right" and "Isn't it?" and "Oi, Liam, you wanker." But mostly, I just hate this kind of single in general. I've talked about this before. It's the same kind of dumb, overbearing, empty lead-off single you release when you're too big to care or try anymore. It's not about anything, there's no hook, it just sounds big and loud because you're big and famous. It's claiming a hit by birthright. Oasis were always about arrogance, but they'd at least try to demonstrate why, usually. Here, they're just resting on their throne so that they and everyone else rooting for Team Oasis can bask in their victory. You know what I mean? Yeah, y'all know what I mean, right? You know what I'm saying? This guy gets it, am I right? The production is just smothering, just layers upon layers of guitars, and a string section too. I can't even hear the bass. In fact, can you guys even hear me? Turn it down! Turn it down! Turn it down! There is one thing most critics have pointed to as the fatal flaw of this album, and that is its interminable, crushing length. Which, you look at the running time, 72 minutes, that's pretty lengthy. That's on the longish side, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the songs themselves. Look at the track listing here. 7 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 5, 4.5, almost 6, 9. Not one short or even medium length song, except for one blessedly tight 2-minuter right at the end. Now, this isn't new exactly. They'd recorded songs like this before. Champagne Supernova was 8 minutes. Rock and Roll Star spends its last 2 minutes just blasting away. But it's one thing to do it on one great song on a classic album, and another to expect your fans to spend 7 minutes listening to something called Magic Pie. The second song on the album is much better. My Big Mouth is about how the Gallaghers are constantly saying funny and stupid things and they don't really care. See, I can see how critics could have been fooled by the overwhelming grandiosity of Do You Know What I Mean, followed by a fairly decent second song in My Big Mouth. But then we hit Magic Pie.
Dig his friends, dig his shoes.
Look, this song sucks. In fact, I would call this the point where the album just wrecks for good and never recovers. It's literally called Magic Pie. And if you think they're going to take that nonsense phrase and do something cool or interesting with it, no, it's just about how he has his magic pie. And it goes for fucking ever. And the second single, Stand By Me, comes after that. It also just goes on for fucking ever. And we're not talking like prog rock, multi-part suites with different sections or anything. Every song on here does the same trick. It just blasts and blasts the chorus over and over. And it's not even a good chorus most of the time.
Stand by me, stand by me, stand by me.
Oh, blessedly short 2.5-minute song. You can't come fast enough. It's hard to tell what exactly Oasis is doing wrong here, because, well, it's hard to tell what they were doing right the first time. Their lyrics never made any sense. Noel has tried to figure out what went wrong many times. And the short answer is, 1, Oasis were Spinal Tap levels of dysfunctional at that point. Noel really hated Liam, and he was kind of thinking about just getting rid of him entirely. 2, no one even wanted to make a record, but they did want to keep making boatloads of money. And 3, everyone was high out of their minds on coke and or meth.
It's the sound of a bunch of guys on coke in the studio, not giving a fuck.
The producer should have kept him in line, but he failed because he was also coked out of his mind. And this whole record sounds like it. They were trying to be bigger and louder, but Oasis was already big and loud. They are literally mixed to be the loudest possible volume before sound compression. They'd hit the ceiling. This wasn't like Matchbox 20 deciding to turn it up a notch. There was nowhere higher to go. I've heard this record called a hangover album, but it's more like the last hour of a party that's raging long after the fun stopped and everyone should have gone home. The entire middle of this album is flabby as hell. There's one good song in there, Don't Go Away. And that was the big one I remember.
So don't go away. Say what you say. Say that you stay.
But I kind of feel like it's a little too obvious. Like, too direct. Don't go away. Simple enough. Part of what made Oasis great was that their lyrics felt huge, but you couldn't ever pin down exactly what it meant. It was very poetic. And this is, well, it's just not. It's not the worst thing ever, but it's considerably less special. So there's one other thing I want to mention. You ever heard of this band called the Beatles?
Don't let me down.
You know that the band Oasis was frequently compared to the Beatles? Apparently Oasis did, because Noel filled the entire album with Beatles references.
Fuel on the hill and I feel fine. Hell, skelter, let it be. Along the winding road.
I don't know why he did that. It's almost like a joke. But it's not just name checks either, it's the production. Like, you know the really dense parts of Strawberry Fields Forever or Day in the Life, where they just kept layering new sounds over each other? Well, Be Here Now is like that on steroids. Just noise. More noise. It just doesn't feel new anymore. They went from being inspired by the Beatles to just rotely copying them. And of course, if we're talking about the Beatles, well, guess we gotta get to it, so here we go. Yes, their other big giant single off the album, All Around the World.
All around the world. You gotta spread the word. Tell them what you heard. You're gonna make a better day.
As you can tell by looking at the video, this is their Beatlesiest song yet. Specifically, it's Oasis's version of Hey Jude or All You Need Is Love. You know, a big stadium anthem with a big chorus about how it's all gonna be okay.
You know it's gonna be okay.
This is actually the first Oasis song Noel Gallagher ever wrote, but he held off on recording it till the band was famous enough that they had the budget and the leeway to make it as big as he wanted. And once he had it, he sure delivered. He delivered the most bloated, unlistenable song of his entire career.
All around the world. You gotta spread the word.
For one thing, it's another nothing chorus. On its own, it's just hollow platitudes and sentiment. But Hey Jude and All You Need Is Love are also arguably both that from a certain point of view. But Paul and John absolutely sell it. I believe Jude's sadness will be made better, and Love Is All You Need. Oasis, meanwhile, well, they have their sentimental side, absolutely, but big, warm feelings of peace and love for the entire world, coming out of Liam's snotty, nasally whine. Jesus Christ, it sounds sarcastic. No, I don't buy it. And I think they knew people wouldn't buy it because they can't stop trying to sell it as many ways as they can. Na-na-nas, trumpets, French horns, strings, key changes. If I really wanted to convey how hard this is to listen to, I'd just play the song in all its 9.5-minute tedium. It just keeps going and going, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's like climbing up a Mount Everest-sized mountain of cocaine. It's a death march of peace and love. All around the world, you gotta spread the word. Tell them what you heard. Oh my god, it's like listening to them go to literally every single person in the world and sing the chorus at them. I hate this album. After that, one more too long song. It's getting better, man. I like that because it's literally a Beatles title with some bad attitude attached to it. They are on brand. And even though just like all the rest of the album, it's way too much, I get it. I mean, I can see the good Oasis in there. I still feel it. The world-conquering rock stars are in there. The arc of history has done weird things to this album. And in fact, it reminds me a lot of another overhyped 90s disaster, The Phantom Menace. Because it went from the greatest thing ever to, well, okay, there were a couple bad parts, but it was mostly good, to, oh my god, that was a turd from start to finish, to, okay, calm down, it wasn't that bad. And no, it's not the worst thing ever. But it has that reputation because Oasis could only do big things in that era. So if they failed, it must have been an epic failure, just by logic. No, it's not that bad. It's just not very good. Oh right, and I almost forgot. The closing song! A glorious masterpiece to close us out.
It's magnificent. It's stupendous. It's short.
2 minutes and 8 seconds. I love it already. So let's take a quick listen to All Around the World Reprise. Piss off, you wankers.